On July 3rd, a very interesting document was filed in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. This document was filed by the government. I have to turn off my volume here. This document was filed by the government in a case against Bijan Rafikian, who was General Michael Flynn's associate in the Flynn intelligence group. This document is a fascinating document. It's only 3 pages, so we can go through it in total. We can actually read the whole thing. Quote, it's titled Notice of Correction to the Record. I apologize for the volume, guys. Periscope's being weird. I can't fix that, so y'all are going to have to bear with me and deal with the lack of volume. Turn it up as much high as you can. I turn mine up as high as I can. Periscope's got issues. Okay. The document says the following. Let me ask you this. This is first the court at a June 13th, 2019 hearing. The court asks the prosecutor, let me ask you this. It's not in the indictment. Is the government alleging that Mr. Flynn was part of this conspiracy? Mr. Gillis says, we are not, Your Honor. The court says, Mr. Gillis, who's the assistant U.S. attorney prosecuting Mr. Rafikian. The court says, right, so you're not presenting any statements by him, by General Flynn. Any testimony. There would be no evidence from him as to the existence of the conspiracy. Mr. Gillis says, well, Your Honor, no, Your Honor, as to that. There will certainly be testimony from General Flynn, and from that testimony, the jury could draw a reasonable inference that there was a conspiracy, but we do not contend that General Flynn was a part of that conspiracy. That's quoting from the government's document. Now the government is saying now on July 3rd, it says, quote, the government must amend this representation. At trial, the government will ask the court to find, based on a preponderance of evidence presented at trial, that Flynn was a co-conspirator in the conspiracy charged in the superseding indictment. The government will introduce out-of-court statements by Flynn pursuant to Federal Rule of Evidence 801 D2E, which is the rule that allows for hearsay by co-conspirators in a crime. The government does not plan to call Flynn as a witness in its case in chief. Now, we didn't know about this document today because it was just recently unsealed, but there are 2 novel facts. One is that the government decided not to call Michael Flynn as a witness in the case against this Turkish man who allegedly violated Foreign Agents Registration Act in trying to get Michael Flynn to work on behalf of the Turkish government in accusing a guy named Fethullah Gulen. I mean, that's not really here or there ultimately the substance of what ultimately the Turkish government was trying to do. What's fascinating is that 1, they're not going to call Flynn as a witness when they said they would, and 2, that they're calling him an unindicted co-conspirator when they had previously said that he was not an unindicted co-conspirator. Very strange. What are they saying that he's a co-conspirator in? Well, that you have to go back to the indictment. So that's a document filed December 12th, 2018 under seal. It is a document that alleges that Bijan Rafikian and a guy in another game named Kamil Alptekin, 2 Turkish guys, that they participated in what is count 1, quote, a conspiracy to act as an agent of a foreign government and to make false statements and willful omissions in a FARA filing. So that's the only conspiracy count in this indictment that the government previously said Michael Flynn did not participate in, but is now saying that he is an unindicted co-conspirator. What is the substance of this charge? Let's go down to read the count. So again, count 1, this is now page 17 of the same document, the original indictment, filed in December against Mr. Rafikian. From at least July 2016 through at least March 2017, the defendants, together with others known and unknown, knowingly and intentionally conspired, A, to knowingly act and cause others to act in the United States as the agent of a foreign government without prior notification to the Attorney General in violation of 18 U.S.C. 951, and B, to willfully make in a document filed with or furnished to the Attorney General under the provisions of the Foreign Agents Registration Act a false statement of material fact, and to willfully omit from the document a material fact required to be stated therein, and to willfully omit from the document a material fact or a copy of a material document necessary to make the statements therein and the copies of documents furnished therewith not misleading in violation of 22 U.S.C. 618A2. What does that mean? Again, guys, I apologize for the audio, but this is a Periscope problem. Some people have it good, some people don't. If it's a problem for you, like switch out and restart your Periscope app. And like I know that it can be flaky. The audio can be flaky for some people. I understand that's a problem. Back to what's going on here. Basically, the federal government has accused there to be a conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act, namely to make false statements in an application, to make false statements in a registration, saying, okay, we are registering as a foreign agent, we are giving you the statement that we are doing so. Basically, the government is saying that these Turkish guys conspired to put false statements or to omit material facts in this application. And now, the government is now saying that Michael Flynn was a co-conspirator in the effort to lie in a FARA registration statement. So that's what they're now saying. They're saying he's an unindicted co-conspirator. He was part of a group that conspired to lie in this registration statement. Again, that's a key. I just really want you to understand that. That's what they're saying Michael Flynn did now. Before, they said Michael Flynn was not part of this conspiracy. But now, after July 3rd, they've completely changed their mind, and they're now saying he is, in fact, part of the conspiracy. It's really weird. Why is the government doing this? Well, there's some hint as to why the government has changed its position. This is an email that was sent to defense counsel in the Virginia case, so sent to Mr. Rafikian's lawyers by James Gillis, the AUSA, who is prosecuting Mr. Rafikian. It says, quote, this is a letter from Mr. Gillis, the AUSA, the U.S. attorney. According to General Flynn's counsel, Flynn did not provide his Covington attorneys with any untruthful information. He did not read the FARA filing when he signed it, and he was not aware at the time that he signed the FARA filing that it contained the false statements and omissions that are listed in paragraph 5 of his statement of events. According to Flynn's counsel, he agrees that the statements in the FARA filing are in fact false and misleading. According to Flynn's counsel, his testimony would remain consistent with the facts of his plea colloquy, his statement of the offense, and his testimony before the grand jury. We do not necessarily agree with these characterizations. Interesting. So basically, he's writing a letter warning and saying that there's this quote-unquote new information about General Flynn that has come out, or rather that General Flynn has said something that they weren't anticipating, namely that General Flynn is not willing to state under oath that he lied, knowingly lied in these FARA statements, that he reviewed it before it was published, and that he was aware that it contained false statements and omissions. Okay, so I want you to get this straight. Prior to July 3rd, or prior to this whole document, the government was saying two things. The government was making, just one primary thing. They said that Michael Flynn was not part of any conspiracy to lie on the FARA registration. That's what they're saying. That's what their prior position was. Michael Flynn was not part of that conspiracy. Now, they're saying he was. The reason they changed their mind is that Michael Flynn refused to testify that he knowingly lied on a FARA registration statement. There's real tension here. I'm hoping that you guys can understand it. On the one hand, the government has previously said he was not a conspirator in any attempt to lie or omit material facts on a registration statement. On the other hand, they're so angry that he won't testify in court that he did lie and make material omissions on a FARA registration statement, that they are now claiming he was part of a conspiracy to lie and make material omissions in registration statements. Do you see how Kafkaesque this is? You see how Kafkaesque it is? Michael Flynn's position was previously, everybody seemed to be in agreement. Michael Flynn stated, I did not knowingly lie. Government, Michael Flynn was not part of a conspiracy to knowingly lie. But then recently the government's in testimony is like, hey, Michael, we want you to testify that you knowingly lied. And he's like, what? I didn't knowingly lie. And he's like, no, but you admitted to that. He's like, no, I didn't. I didn't admit to any such thing. And they're like, well, if you don't testify that you knowingly lied, we're going to change our position with the court and accuse you of knowingly lying. What? Like, ridiculous. So why is the government think they can get away with this? Well, they think, their argument is, apparently, that General Flynn said in his statement of offense that he knowingly lied. That's their claim, apparently, right? They're saying that he pled to this already, that it's in, there seems to be an implicit idea that it's inconsistent with his prior statements, that Michael Flynn is now changing his position. Indeed, the New York Times is going with that story as well. We can pull up the New York Times really quickly. Michael Flynn changes his story, putting him on collision course with judge at the New York Times headline to this effect. Did he change his story? The statement of offense doesn't seem to suggest so. So again, I'm now going to a new document. This is the statement of offense that Michael Flynn pled to on December 1st, 2017. Like, I think all the way back in 2017. So we're talking, gosh, a year and a half ago. Statement of offense includes a whole bunch of stuff about Russia, right? If you remember that, the Michael Flynn case was a lot about Russia. And so about whether or not he lied about his contacts with the Russian government. But the final part of the statement of the offense says the following. This is something Michael Flynn admitted to. This is what they're now saying. Michael Flynn has changed his position. Listen carefully. On March 7th, 2017, Flynn filed multiple documents with the Department of Justice pursuant to the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA for short, pertaining to a project performed by him and his company, the Flynn Intel Group, Incorporated, for the principal benefit of the Republic of Turkey, known as the Turkey Project. In the FARA filings, Flynn made materially false statements and omissions, including by falsely stating that A, Flynn Intelligence Group did not know whether or to the extent to which the Republic of Turkey was involved in the Turkey Project. B, the Turkey Project was involved in improving U.S. business organizations' confidence regarding doing business in Turkey. And C, an op-ed by Flynn published in The Hill on November 8th, 2016 was written at his own initiative and by omitting that officials from the Republic of Turkey provided supervision and direction over the Turkey Project. The key point, I want to focus on this particular language in this statement of the offense. Quote, Flynn admits that, quote, in the FARA filings, Flynn made materially false statements and omissions, including by falsely stating 3 various things. Sidney Powell is indeed Flynn's lawyer and is working to clean it up. Flynn does not admit in this statement to knowingly lying. You'll notice the word knowingly does not appear. The statement, and also no statements about what Flynn knew and any lies that Flynn told knowingly and willfully, that doesn't appear. All that appears in the statement of the offense is that he made materially false statements and omissions. Now, go back to the email that was sent by the AUSA on July 2nd explaining the problem. It says, quote, according to Flynn's counsel, he agrees that the statements in the FARA filing are in fact false and misleading. According to General Flynn's counsel, he was not aware at the time that he signed the FARA filing that it contained the false statements and omissions that are listed in paragraph 5 of the statement of offense, the thing I just read. And according to Flynn's counsel, his testimony would remain consistent with the facts of the plea colloquy, his statement of the offense, and his testimony before the grand jury. We do not necessarily agree with these characterizations. Weird, because I just read it and it says the same thing. Like, the statement of the offense does not contain anything about what Flynn knew. And that actually is in contrast. Like, again, going back to the statement of the offense, again, this is the document from his DC case. When it talks about Flynn's false statements, it talks about the fact that Flynn knew at the time that the things he was saying were not true. For example, paragraph 3 of the statement of the offense, quoting, during the interview, Flynn falsely stated that he did not ask Russia's ambassador to the United States to refrain from escalating the situation in response to the sanctions that the United States had imposed against Russia. Skipping ahead a little bit. In truth and in fact, however, Flynn then and there knew that the following had occurred, and it goes through the things Michael Flynn said he knew. Didn't happen, though. So, a very, very strange dynamic, where the fact that in other parts of the statement of offense, there's a clear indication of what Flynn knew, that he was knowingly lying. And then, later on, broadcast is frozen. If you're having trouble with audio, refresh your thing, please. Thank you. And then later on, it says, finally on this Turkey stuff, there's no indication at all that there was any intent or knowledge to lie. So why is the government doing this? Well, Sidney Powell and her lawyers have something to say about this. They have something to say, and they have some interesting factual matters that discuss what actually happened Okay, quote. So this is trying to discuss what happened and why the government's changed its position. Quote, the government's about-face could be retaliation for Mr. Flynn's truthful testimony the government does not like. Quote, as the court knows, Mr. Flynn has new counsel. After participating in further trial prep sessions with the government, new counsel advised the prosecutors last week, as Mr. Flynn has said in prior interviews, his testimony of the underlying facts of the transactions remains consistent with his prior testimony in interviews. Unfortunately, the government was not satisfied with that. Prosecutors have been adamant Mr. Flynn testified that he authorized the FARA form knowing and intending that it contained false statements. Mr. Flynn cannot give that testimony because it is not true. Somebody asked a very good question. Is this the Obama government or Trump's government? Yeah, good question. Powell and the other lawyers in the team go on. Mr. Flynn advised the government, as Mr. Flynn has said before, that much of what he understands is with the benefit of hindsight. When Mr. Flynn agreed in a statement of offense in Judge Sullivan's court that certain information in the FARA filing was false, he was doing so with some hindsight. Underside counsel advised the prosecutors that Mr. Flynn did not know and did not authorize the signing the FARA form before believing there was anything wrong in it. He honestly answered the questions his former counsel posed to them to the best of his recollection, and with the benefit of hindsight. By the way, guys, I just want to, okay, thank you. And some of the benefit of hindsight. He authorized and paid for their extensive independent investigation to the tune of approximately $170,000. What's going on? What does this mean? I want to skip ahead slightly. In the meeting with the prosecutors on June 27th, underside counsel walked the prosecutors through the previous notes that they had, which rebutted, if not flat out belied, the government's misunderstanding of Mr. Flynn's statements to his own counsel on the issues the government raised. This prompted a heated exchange with Mr. Van Grack, the original prosecutor, Mr. Flynn, who's now moved on from Robert Mueller's team and is now the head of the FARA division. After new counsel, Mr. Van Grack and his team seemed to double down. They've apparently put former counsel in a direct conflict with Mr. Van Grack. Within minutes of concluding the interview of Mr. So anyway, that's enough of. I'm tired of reading documents. Basic point again. Why is this happening? Why is the government changing its position on General Flynn? The answer to that question is because they think he should publicly admit to something he didn't do, that he should publicly admit to knowingly lying on a FARA registration form. That's something that wouldn't happen. Understand, these FARA registration forms are extremely complicated documents filed by attorneys. And indeed, it was in the attorneys at Covington and Burling, the prior lawyers for General Flynn, who spent took $170,000 in fees, made a broad-ranging inquiry into the facts of the matter about whether or not Flynn's activities at Flynn Intel Group were directed by the Turkish government, and in their judgment filed the most accurate report that they could, that Flynn did not review every single factual statement, etc. It's totally reasonable, especially given that the facts suggest that they were under pressure to file with haste. Somebody asked, do I think Covington set him up? No, I do not think that. I think Covington was working to try and help General Flynn as best they could. But what I think the strange thing is happening here is this is a way of getting back at General Flynn. The legal import of General Flynn being declared an unindicted co-conspirator is very unclear, right? It's a strange thing. One, it's strange because it's, again, the general is pleading to a different case that, again, this broader false statement thing that he's going to be sentenced for shortly. So it's just kind of weird that they care. It's almost like, and two, he's not even in this case, so he can't defend himself. Again, to understand the technique, the mechanism that the government is using here. They're not going to call him to the stand as a witness. They're saying he's an unindicted co-conspirator, and they're going to get an affirmative finding from the judge to that effect, and they're going to do it through the course of the question of whether a particular piece of evidence is admissible. Because again, there's a rule of evidence in general, hearsay is not supposed to be admissible unless it meets an exception. One of the exceptions to the hearsay rule is statements made by unindicted co-conspirators. And those are allowed to be brought in as evidence. So basically the prosecutors are playing a little game, right? They're like, we're not happy with you, so we're going to have a court in a different proceeding find that you make a public finding that you were an unindicted co-conspirator in order to get this evidence in. But it's totally artificial because this evidence could get in under other hearsay exceptions and other rules. But we're going to have to make this finding just to make you look bad in the press. Guys, if the audio is going bad, restart. Please stop complaining. So it's a very, very interesting technique. And it's very, very weird. Somebody's saying, is the government anticipating the Powell team not fully up to speed? Perhaps. Perhaps. Perhaps they think they can get away with these shenanigans. But I don't think they will. Because they made public statements in court that General Flynn was not a co-conspirator. The substance of which he was not a co-conspirator is that the conspiracy was to lie on a FARA document. If he knowingly lied, which is what they want him to say, he would have been part of the conspiracy. The fact that he's saying, hey, I didn't knowingly lie on the FARA document is consistent with their original position that he was not part of the conspiracy. The fact that what they're demanding of General Flynn is that he contradict their statements that he was not a co-conspirator. That's the bizarre thing. The U.S. attorneys got up repeatedly in front of the court, admitted to the judge, said Michael Flynn was not part of this conspiracy. And now they were demanding that he get up and say, yeah, I knowingly lied on this FARA registration statement, which was the subject of the conspiracy. Like, makes no sense. No sense at all. One has to see it as probable revenge or something for finding new lawyers, for something. But it was revenge. Trump doesn't have to wait to pardon. He can put an end to this right now. Bill Barr can put an end to this by firing the lawyers who were responsible for this bizarre about-face. Because it is truly bizarre. If indeed the problem is that Flynn won't say that he knowingly lied, why were they ever suggesting to a federal judge that he was not part of the conspiracy? The judge has a right to ask them very clear, very simple questions like, did you lack candor with the court when you said that Mr. Flynn was not a co-conspirator in this effort to lie on FARA statements? Like, it's very bizarre behavior from these prosecutors. So there's some very, very weird shenanigans going on. And it's not just that. The New York Times is part of these shenanigans. It's a very bizarre article from a guy named Adam Goldman, reporter at the New York Times. Very bizarre article. Michael Flynn changes his story, putting him on collision course with the judge. Somebody says, Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor, backed off his planned testimony in a federal case against a former associate, according to court documents unsealed on Tuesday. That's a very strong factual assertion that is belied by the facts of the case. Mr. Goldman apparently is incapable of reading public court documents like I just did. You'll notice that I was reading from court documents. They say he backed off from plain testimony. Weird. Mr. Flynn says it's consistent with his prior testimony and his prior statements of guilt. In the statement of the offense, Flynn said, I filed a registration statement that contained false and misleading representations. Today, his email to the prosecutors was, I may file a registration statement that included materially false statements. I didn't know they were false, though. I didn't know they were false at the time I made them. That is completely consistent with his prior testimony. It is also completely consistent with him not being a co-conspirator in a case about all this stuff. Somebody asked, why isn't Flynn fighting? He is. How much longer is this farce going to go on? Unclear. But what is clear is that the government is railroading him. They are not happy with him because what they're doing is dirty. They are trying to do General Flynn dirty. They're trying to claim that he's a liar because he won't publicly admit to knowingly lying on a FARA registration statement when they've said all along that he didn't know, effectively, that he didn't knowingly lie on a registration statement because he was not a co-conspirator in the underlying case, which was about knowingly lying on FARA registration statements. They're doing him dirty. President Trump has let this go on long enough. the shenanigans being pulled by the various lawyers involved in this, by Mr. Van Grack, by Mr. What is his name, Gillis. The shenanigans here, it's beyond the pale. It's unacceptable. The fact that the New York Times is complicit in spreading this misinformation about General Flynn is appalling and contemptible. And something should be done to remedy the fact that Mr. Flynn is getting railroaded in this remarkable way. Okay, with that, I'll take questions. If you guys didn't understand something, I'm happy to explain it. Somebody says, but it works. People don't read past headlines. Indeed, it's very, very deceptive reporting from David Goldman, I think. And I'm probably going to write a thread to that effect. Somebody says, why do Republicans just let this happen? I mean, because they're told they're supine. Sidney Powell is involved. Flynn does not have a gag order. There was briefly a gag order on this particular fact. Why doesn't Sullivan push back on it? Actually, Sullivan does look to be very curious as to what's happening. Emma Sullivan just recently put a minute order up on the website. This was just literally a couple hours ago. He said, quote, Defense counsel, on June 24th, 2019, defense counsel represented to the court that Mr. Flynn was scheduled to testify in the Eastern District of Virginia. Judge Tringa, on July 9th, issued an order unsealing certain court records, including the government's notice of correction to the record and a few other documents. The government is ordered to file a submission to the court no later than 5 p.m. on July 10th, i.e. tomorrow, 22 hours from now, explaining how the unsealed records in the United States v. Rafikian case will impact the proceedings before this court. Mr. Flynn is ordered to file his response to the government submission no later than 5 p.m. on July 11th. The court will not extend these filing deadlines. This is remarkable, a remarkable difference. And because Judge Sullivan is asking for an immediate filing, like tomorrow, from the government about what the hell they're doing and how it impacts the Flynn sentencing. I don't think this is tied to the security clearance to see the Kisley Act transcripts. I think it's something different, but it's possible. Why did Obama hire Flynn then tell Trump he could not? I have no idea. Why does Barr not address this behind the scenes? That's a fine question. One would wonder whether or not Attorney General Barr is up to speed on the shenanigans that his subordinates are playing with the Flynn case, because these are some serious shenanigans. Flynn did try and take a plea. He's still trying to take a plea. The question is why the United States attorneys are demanding that he lie and contradict his prior statements. It's very bizarre behavior from the U.S. attorneys. Very bizarre behavior. All right. I think I've explained enough. I hope you enjoyed this. This is pretty complicated, and it's a little difficult to do in Periscope. I hope this was sufficiently clear for y'all. Hope we got value out of it. But I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. ... bottom right-hand corner of your screen, the follow button, and I'm going to try and write something up a little more clear so I can really explain it precisely. Peace, guys.